You know what political correctness reminds me of? A tumor that won't stop growing. This might be a bit of a problematic topic to cover, but hey, that's never stopped me. Let me get this off my chest right out of the gate. Political correctness is fucking stupid. And I don't just mean stupid as in it's bad or I don't like it, but I mean that it's objectively unintelligent. Allow me to explain. I'm sure we've all heard the phrase before at some point in our earthly existence, usually with some sort of negative connotation attached to it. People are quick to throw around the term politically correct without fully understanding what it implies. But what does political correctness mean in the first place? Well, I'm glad you asked. For those of you who go outside, political correctness essentially refers to the idea of avoiding any form of speech or expression that's perceived as problematic or discriminatory towards a certain group of people. For example, instead of referring to people of color as blacks, politically correct individuals would prefer to use the term African Americans. Or instead of using terms such as mailman or fisherman, a more politically correct approach would be to use gender-neutral terms such as male person or fisher person. So on and so forth, you get the idea. Now, on paper, this doesn't sound like such a bad concept. I may be pretty stuck in my ways when it comes to a lot of things, but I'm in no way opposed to the idea of a more progressive society. The fact that people are willing to acknowledge systemic injustices in the world and are making an effort to fix or remove them is a really good thing. I mean, come on, I think all, or at least most of us, advocate for equal rights of all people, no matter their skin color, gender, or sexuality. We're all humans, and we should all be treated like humans, except for Nicolas Cage. But that's not the real issue here. Because like with all good things, save for chocolate and strippers, moderation is key. And there comes a point where you have to ask yourself, how much is too much? Because while I think that social justice and equality are important, they should never come at the cost of people's freedom of expression. Cause I mean, come on, do I really have to memorize all 150 of your gender identities just to have a conversation with you? Do I really have to apologize or feel guilty for something that my ancestors did? It's shit like this that makes me hopeful for a fascist revolution. I can hear those keyboards typing from a mile away. Which brings me to the topic of this video and why I've grown to despise the term political correctness altogether. The political correctness I'm referring to is the kind that does not intend to create equality or justice among society, but rather to silence and censor people who choose to share an opinion that others may or may not agree with. I'm sure you're all familiar with this brand of social justice snowflake. You know, the kind who loses their shit when you assume their gender or use the wrong pronoun, the kind who wants minorities to receive special treatment without justification, and the kind who thinks that all men are rapists and all white people are racist due to injustices done in the past. The problem with political correctness lies not in theory, but in practice. Because when you take this concept to its absolute extreme, it can become a very toxic and self-righteous way of thinking. And I'm sure we're all aware of how horrible it can be. People starting protests over political activists they don't agree with, identity politics being shoved down the throats of everyone who goes on social media, and the concept of dark humor being completely outlawed by oversensitive snowflakes who don't know how to take jokes. It's all just part of their fucked up agenda. There are literally people in other parts of this planet who don't have food, and we're worried about what gender pronouns we're supposed to use? Oh, the humanity. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought this was a free country. You know, one where you're allowed to exercise your freedom of expression, where you have the right to voice your opinion no matter who may disagree. Call me naive, I guess. More than anything, I think we all just need an ego check. We're all in such a hurry to end up on the right side of history that we forget to respect each other's opinions and to acknowledge our own moral shortcomings. I would know, I go to college. I mean, come on, we're all just a bunch of dirty apes with pocket-sized computers. Do we really need to act like we're better than everyone else? These are the people who argue that racism is wrong in all contexts, which I agree with, but they're the same people who claim that they hate all white people. Where's the logic? I don't care who used to be in power, that's a stupid mindset. Now, I'm not religious, but I do think it's important to practice what you preach, or at least be consistent with your own beliefs and quit imposing these uneducated double standards. We're so disconnected as a society and a nation that we would rather shun people with opposing opinions than take a moment to listen so we can better understand each other.
Now that's fucked up.
Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not encouraging people to go out and start spouting off racial slurs at minorities, although that would be quite entertaining to watch. All I'm saying is that people need to be a bit less dismissive and close-minded when it comes to the things you say. So instead of getting mad at someone for supporting the president and passing them off as a racist, try talking it out with them and explaining why you personally disagree with their opinion. It's the first step to take in making the world a better place. If I can't identify someone's gender identity without prior explanation, I shouldn't be held accountable for it, especially if I'm willing to try. Maybe you should have made it a bit more clear. And most importantly, I shouldn't have to risk having my head on a platter every time I make a joke that pokes fun at a certain group of people or breaks the boundaries of what is considered acceptable in mainstream society. I am aware that I'm walking a very fine line here. But if that's what it takes to get my voice heard, then so be it. Now, it would be easy for me to use the cliche that I'm not a very political person as an excuse to say a bunch of ignorant shit, but that just simply wouldn't be the case. I happen to be a very political person. Because when something like extreme political correctness comes along and threatens your basic human rights, it's important to be aware of it. And you best believe I'm going to take a stand. Oh wait. A lot of politically correct individuals like to employ the argument that there's a difference between free speech and hate speech, but the problem is that they can never identify what the actual difference is. As bad as hate speech can be, it is technically a subset of free speech. Where do we draw the line? For all I know, saying kill all men is a prime example of hate speech that could potentially get you locked away for years. But in today's day and age, it's okay to hate men. We're just making up for all those rape cases after all. Get the fuck out of here. Now, I know what you're thinking. Oh, he's just pressed because he's a straight white male and now he's getting called out for it. He doesn't know what real oppression is. And you're right, I don't. As much as I wish I could say that I have, I've never been truly oppressed, so I'll never know the full extent of what it feels like. But the truth is, there's always a double standard when it comes to political correctness. You can say virtually whatever you want about a person if they're in the majority, but make one wrong remark about women, the LGBT, or a person of color, consider yourself public enemy number one. It would be one thing if you had to behave this way towards everybody, but the fact that it only applies towards certain groups of people just goes to show how biased the entire mentality of PC culture is. They only want justice for one side, even if it's at the expense of everyone else. Shouldn't the idea of one group of people having advantage over another be something we stand against, something we leave in the past for good? Now, I'm not going to try to ignore or deny the fact that I'm at least somewhat privileged by being born in the majority, and therefore I'll never be able to know the full extent of societal oppression. But I just don't understand why we need to compensate for that by placing minorities on a pedestal and giving them certain freedoms and immunities that other people aren't allowed to have. If we want to end oppression, we have to make all sides equal. But that's not what we're trying to do. We need to learn that there's a difference between correcting and overcorrecting. And at this point, it seems as though we've metaphorically swerved off a bridge into shark-infested water. Look, I'm not trying to hurt anyone's feelings, which seems to be a bit of a challenge in today's day and age. All I'm trying to argue is that political correctness just doesn't look like the way forward. If anything, it's the opposite. It's a giant step backwards. All it does is violate my right to free speech, which is something that's both enforced and protected in the Constitution. It's just how our country works. Whether you like it or not, free speech is free speech, no matter how offensive or distasteful it may be. And yes, that does unfortunately enable people to spout off racist, homophobic, and other ignorant shit that I don't agree with. It's just a small price we have to pay for the greater good of freedom. And whether you think it's a good idea or not, political correctness in and of itself is a violation of free speech. Because you're literally telling someone what they can and cannot say. It's censorship at best and a violation of basic human rights at worst. That doesn't sound like free speech to me, and it certainly doesn't sound progressive. If anything, it's the opposite. It's State Farm. So to all you pink-haired, tree-hugging SJWs out there, no matter how much you try to shelter yourself from the world and get other people to comply with your extremist agenda, you can't stop them from saying what they want to say. Whether you approve of it or not, each and every person in this country is allowed to voice their own beliefs. And if you don't like it, get the fuck out. It's just the principle our nation was founded on. And even if you don't agree, you still have to acknowledge that right. That's just the way it be. Because it doesn't matter how fair and unprejudiced we try to make our society, there will always be some ignorant bigot out there trying to get under your skin and offend as many people as he can. Oh, sorry, I used he and not they. Simple mistake. It's just a double-edged sword when it comes to living in a free country. Some people just abuse that freedom, but that doesn't mean we should take it away. But trust me, I would much rather have to deal with a few alt-right douchebags every now and again over having to live in a communist dictatorship, and I'm sure plenty of you can agree with me on that. Because it's a very slippery slope when it comes to taking away people's freedom. First, you can't say anything, next, you can't do anything. So stop the virtue signaling, stop the sensitivity, stop the bullshit. Jokes are funny no matter how dark or problematic they may be, and there's not a damn thing you can do about it, darling. Ben Shapiro mentioned something about this in one of his podcasts, and as much as I disagree with a lot of his opinions, I think I have to side with him on this one. This brand of over-progressive and hypersensitive thinking does nothing to benefit society or help advance the human race, but instead only breeds insanity. And it goes beyond the level of just being annoying or inconvenient, as it poses significant and genuine harm to society. Because when we focus all of our energy on trivial shit like, what is the correct term to refer to black people, all it does is take attention away from actual instances of discrimination. And is that really what you want? Political correctness isn't something that's going to help out people facing adversity or make up for past oppression. It's nothing more than the death of free speech. You're not trying to prevent injustice, you're not trying to further the state of humanity. You're just trying to silence opinions that you don't agree with. And that pisses me off. This is the land of the free after all, so wouldn't you think that you'd be allowed a bit more leeway when it comes to the things you say? The First Amendment's still there, guys. It's not going anywhere. I get that social inequity is a serious issue right now, but maybe if we stopped bringing it up all the time, it wouldn't be so prevalent in our society. Maybe we just need to stop playing the victim. I don't know, just a thought. Oh god, I've never felt like such a bigot. I know it's easy for me to say that as a straight white male, but even I catch myself falling prey to this victim mentality from time to time. But never have I ever tried to control the things that people can and cannot say simply at the risk of hurting my feelings. Even I'm not that soft. I value the freedom of my country more than I value my own pride. But the idea of censoring people based on something they said that you didn't like doesn't sound like freedom to me at all. It sounds like fascism. And fascism is bad. And I'm not even trying to demonize political correctness as an excuse to say the N-word or make edgy jokes. I just care about the good of my nation and don't want my kids to face the consequences of a totalitarian society. Now, don't get me wrong, I think political correctness to some extent is a good thing, as it prevents people from becoming racist, homophobic pieces of shit. But it should never come at the cost of people's personal freedom. And in today's day and age, it's starting to look like that. This whole social justice, virtue signaling PC culture is not the way forward. If anything, it's just setting us back. So before you spout off at someone for misinterpreting your gender identity or making a joke that you found offensive, keep in mind that they probably weren't trying to make you mad or cross your boundaries. They're just exercising their basic human rights. It's hard to talk about political correctness and social justice without coming off like a completely uninformed bigot, and I hope to God that I didn't come across like that in this video. While I think it's important for us, and especially those in the majority, to be aware of the prejudices and discrimination towards minorities and other groups of people, I also think it's important for people to maintain their freedom of expression. People are so quick to judge others based on their own moral standings that they never stop to take a look at their own conscience. So I leave you with this. If this close-minded and self-righteous way of thinking is really considered politically correct, then I don't want to be correct. That's all for this one. Check you later.